From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Thursday, August 28, 2025. Australia's spy agency and the federal police are investigating if an attack on the former Sydney home of Jewish leader Alex Rivchin was orchestrated by the Iranian government. China is making the most of the uncertainty about the future of the AUKUS military pact. Xi Jinping's government says Anthony Albanese should take the advice of his predecessor Paul Keating and say no to AUKUS. Those stories are live right now at theaustralian.com.au. A judge has found Brittany Higgins defamed former Liberal Minister Linda Reynolds and has ordered Higgins to pay more than $340,000, plus potentially legal costs on top. The judge found Higgins was affected by physical and psychological trauma, but was dishonest in some of her claims. But he also rejected Reynolds' claim that Higgins and her husband engaged in a conspiracy. Today, exactly what Justice Paul Tottle found and why.
Tonight, claims of rape, roadblocks to a police investigation, and a young woman forced to choose between her career and the pursuit of justice.
From the moment this story went to air in 2021...
I woke up mid-rape, essentially.
Linda Reynolds believed her reputation was terminal. Brittany Higgins told Network 10's The Project that as a 24-year-old Liberal staffer, she was raped by a 23-year-old, later identified as Bruce Lehrman. That's an allegation Lehrman has always denied. The federal court found he did, on the balance of probabilities, rape Brittany Higgins, a finding he's now appealing. But the Project story wasn't just an allegation of rape. It was about Higgins' sweeping claim that the then coalition government, led by Scott Morrison, had actively silenced her. Higgins accused two women of being core to the cover-up: her then boss, Cabinet Minister Linda Reynolds, and Reynolds' then Chief of Staff, Fiona Brown. Both women have since said they're devastated by the allegation, and that in fact they encouraged Higgins to go to the police and gave her their full support. Linda Reynolds alleged that Brittany Higgins and her husband David Shiraz defamed her on 27 January 2022 with this tweet. We've used a voice actor to read David Shiraz's words.
There is a very real chance Linda Reynolds will be called to court this year to answer questions on her involvement in Brittany Higgins feeling pressured by her office not to continue with a complaint to police. She uploads this to her official website.
Shiraz included a screenshot of Reynolds' website, which described the senator as a passionate champion for gender equality and female empowerment. The judge found this conveyed two defamatory imputations: that Reynolds had pressured Higgins not to proceed with a genuine complaint of sexual assault, and that Reynolds was a hypocrite.
Both imputations were defamatory. The defendant has not established her defence of truth or any of her other defences. Damages, including aggravated damages, in the sum of $135,000 will be awarded to the plaintiff.
On Instagram on July 4, 2023, Brittany Higgins posted this.
This is from a current Australian senator who continues to harass me through the media and in the parliament. My former boss, who has publicly apologised for mishandling my rape allegation. Who has had to apologise publicly after defaming me in the workplace. Who had a whole bunch of questionable conduct during my rape trial, who was suing my fiancé for a tweet. This has been going on for years now. It is time to stop.
Included in that Instagram story were two headlines from that day's news, reporting Reynolds was objecting to a $2.4 million compensation payout Higgins had received from the Commonwealth. Justice Tottle said this conveyed the imputations that Reynolds harassed Higgins, mishandled her rape allegation, and engaged in questionable conduct during the trial of Bruce Lehrman. The Supreme Court has allowed us to publish Justice Tottle's real voice, reading a summary of his judgment.
Each of these imputations was defamatory. The defendant has not established her truth, defence, or any of her other defences. Damages, including aggravated damages, in the sum of $180,000 will be awarded to the plaintiff.
On 20 July 2023, Higgins took to Twitter, quoting a story from The Australian that said Reynolds was suggesting an amendment to the ACT Crimes Act to deter individuals from using the media and/or Parliament to refer to an alleged criminal offence that ought properly to be the subject of criminal justice processes.
Imagine being the person earnestly attempting to change the Crime Act to make it illegal for alleged sexual assault survivors to talk about their lived experience, as opposed to, reforming the justice system to actually prosecuting perpetrators. This proposal completely undermines all the crucial work done by the Let Her Speak campaign and the March for Justice movement. Instead of solving the problem, there are people who would prefer to just silence victims.
Justice Tottle found these tweets conveyed the imputation that Reynolds wanted to silence the victims of sexual assault.
I have found that this imputation was defamatory, and I have found the defendant has not established her defence of truth, but she has established the defences of honest opinion, fair comment, and qualified privilege.
So Higgins won that one.
Turning now to the plaintiff's conspiracy claim. To succeed in her claim for damages for conspiracy, the plaintiff was required to prove that the common and sole or predominant purpose of the defendant and Mr. Shiraz in planning the public disclosure of the defendant's story in early 2021 was to injure the plaintiff. The plaintiff has failed to establish this element of her case, and the claim for damages for conspiracy fails.
Reynolds' claim from the beginning has been that Higgins and Shiraz, who boasted of his close links to Labor politicians, sought to destroy her in the Project interview. The judge is saying that Reynolds failed to prove that was Shiraz and Higgins' main purpose in going public with her story. Justice Tottle said Higgins in January 2021 was dealing with the aftermath of physical and psychological trauma. We've used a voice actor to read Justice Tottle's words from the full judgment, which was not read aloud in court.
The defendant was a rape victim, struggling with the long-term effects of the crime. She perceived the perpetrator had been able to get on with his life. I accept she felt this was a grave injustice, and that sense of injustice was accompanied by feelings developed over time that she had not only been let down but was also silenced by the Liberal Party. By early 2021, the defendant had persuaded herself there had been a cover-up, even though that conclusion was not supported by the facts, and had persuaded herself the only way she could address what had happened to her was by making a public disclosure of her experiences.
He said even though Higgins was dishonest in recounting essential elements of the cover-up allegation, it was possible that her motives were altruistic, that she really did want to help others who had suffered sexual violence.
I have no doubt the defendant appreciated that making a public disclosure of her experiences would expose her to unprecedented public scrutiny, much of which might be hostile, bringing with it emotional and psychological pain. It is unlikely the defendant would have exposed herself to that scrutiny and pain if her only concern, her sole or predominant purpose, was to harm the plaintiff.
The judge found that Linda Reynolds behaved in the witness box like, well, a politician, an honest witness, but one who tended to answer the question she wanted to have been asked. He made strong findings about Higgins.
That the defendant's evidence of the immediate aftermath of the rape was unreliable was entirely understandable. It is more difficult, however, to explain other aspects of the 2021 account given by the defendant, which were objectively untrue and misleading, as being attributable to the effects of trauma.
The judge found Higgins' story was so different from the objective facts that
the extent to which the defendant embellished and speculated and passed her speculation off as fact rendered her account tendentious.
In a statement published on Instagram, Higgins said she accepted that Linda Reynolds' feelings were hurt by these events and said, "I'm sorry for that. I wish her well into the future." Higgins, who has recently had a baby, said, "Thank you to the Australian public for their compassion and understanding throughout this journey. My family and I now look forward to healing and rebuilding our lives." Coming up, the judge's findings about Brittany Higgins' evidence. So, in what ways did the judge find Brittany Higgins had been dishonest? Justice Tottle said it's important to remember Brittany Higgins was a media-savvy, strategic thinker when she first aired her allegations.
My assessment is the defendant had persuaded herself, and Mr. Shiraz, of the existence of the cover-up. It was her truth. When she recounted her experiences in the media interviews, some of her statements were plainly and objectively untrue, and in some instances, she omitted facts that were inconsistent with her truth.
Justice Tottle said he'd wrestled with the fact Higgins' recollections had likely been affected by trauma.
That said, and after long reflection on this difficult issue, I have concluded that in her concern to lend credibility to the allegation of a cover-up, the defendant demonstrated such an indifference to the truth that her account of the essential elements of the allegation can only be regarded as dishonest.
The judge said it was essential to Higgins' story that she convey the impression she was treated poorly by Reynolds and Brown. Higgins said Reynolds hated her and regarded her as toxic.
This was clearly untrue.
Justice Tottle said in fact Higgins' own messages showed she believed she had bonded with Reynolds and that Reynolds had offered her a job for after the election, things he was sure Higgins did remember. He said Higgins' own messages also showed that back in 2019 she felt she had been treated well by Fiona Brown, but in the interviews, Higgins created the impression Brown was unapproachable, unsympathetic and terrifying.
The defendant's willingness to speculate and embellish reflected a desire on her part to enhance the credibility of her allegation of a cover-up and her allegation the plaintiff and Ms. Brown had treated her poorly.
He said this was manifested in her statement that Fiona Brown had rejected her request for CCTV footage, her claim Bruce Lehrmann was Reynolds' right-hand man, when in fact he was a junior staffer, and that members of Reynolds' staff had lied to her. In total, the judges ordered Higgins to pay Reynolds damages of $315,000 plus $26,000 in interest. Next, there'll be a fight about legal costs. If Higgins is ordered to pay Reynolds legal fees, that could easily bump the payout up into 7 figures. You can read all our analysis and reporting on this story right now at theaustralian.com.au.